Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast live edition. I am Tracy Stuckrath, your host of Eating at a Meeting, as well as founder and chief connecting officer of Thrive Meetings and Events. Here on the Eating at a Meeting podcast, we talk to experts in all facets around food and beverage to understand how we can create safe, inclusive, and sustainable food and beverage experiences. And this month, today is May 5th, happy Cinco de Mayo. But is also Celiac Disease Awareness and Food Allergy Awareness Month. So this month, you're going to see me in this teal jacket all month long, talking about food allergies and celiac disease. And I am so excited to kick off the month with our first live guest is Dr. Ruchi Gupta. She is the director of the Center for Food Allergy and Asthma Research at Northwestern University and the Lurie Children's Hospital. And Ruchi, we chatted last year about food allergies and your study on adult food allergies.
That's right.
So wanted to bring that back into the conversation, but I know you've been busy during this pandemic with other research and data. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Tracy. So glad to be back.
Thanks. Okay, so let's jump in with adult food allergies or current statistics on food allergies.
Yeah, that would be fun because we recently published 2 papers, 2018 on kids and 2019 on adults. And the data is just fascinating. So the kid data, and I think people are more familiar with, about 8% of kids have food allergy, about 1 in 13, 2 in every classroom. Top 9 allergens that I believe, the peanut, tree nuts, milk, egg, wheat, soy, shellfish, finfish, and that's not the right order. And then now we have sesame as number 9. So that was something new in that paper that we were able to identify sesame as the 9th most common allergen. Okay, adults are so interesting. So we surveyed, about 40,000 adults in the United States. And what was so fascinating is when we asked them if they had a food allergy, about 1 in 5, so about 20% of adults said yes. That was crazy. We double, triple checked that. But then when we looked at their symptoms, and cleaned the data with experts, what we found is that about 10% did have a convincing food allergy. And then in addition to that, what we found was that only about 5% were seeing a physician and had a diagnosis. So you went from 1 in 5 having thinking or, believing they have a food allergy to only 1 in 20 getting a diagnosis. So, but all those 1 in 5 are probably avoiding foods in their diet, which is so challenging, as you, of all people, know.
Yeah, the number of requests that meeting professionals get and caterers get on people saying, I'm allergic to this and this and this and this, and it's not necessarily a food allergy, but they have sensitivities of some sort.
Yeah, or another related condition. I mean, There are so many food conditions. I'm actually coming out with a book in August called Food Without Fear that actually goes through all the food conditions because, when something happens to you when you eat a food, whether that be, GI pain, vomiting, rash, it is scary. It's very scary. And oftentimes, the easiest thing to do is say, all right, I've got something going on with that food, I'm going to avoid it, but we don't often think, and I'm guilty of it too, as an adult, to actually get to a doctor and take care of it because you're like, well, I'll just avoid it. But the problem with that is, in some cases, you may not actually have anything. Could have been, food poisoning or something else going on, and you can enjoy that food. And in other cases, it may be something treatable, right? Something that you can do something about. And then, the final case, if it is a food allergy, then you really need a management plan and you need your epinephrine and you need to know what to do in case you do ingest it.
Right. Yeah. And communicating that need in case of an emergency as well. I mean, the FAAR's got a great food emergency plan, but you have to have an action plan. And the one that I designed, which I should send to you to read, is researching or having information about the diabetic reaction, because if somebody has a diabetes reaction at your event, you need to be able to tell the EMTs if somebody's passed out specifically, right?
Definitely. Yeah, that's exactly right. And, just knowing all of those, because what's so complex with food allergies is you can have any symptom, right? You can have a rash, you can have the vomiting GI stuff, you can have, cardiovascular drop in blood pressure and fainting like you're talking about, you can have respiratory difficulty breathing and throat closing. So there's just so many potential symptoms because it can impact any organ system that it's really important to understand and to have people around you understand it.
Right, exactly. One of the things that I do also suggest is having, if you're going to an event and you do have a severe allergy or other condition, is like have a buddy. If it's not the meeting planner, who's probably got tons of things going on, but make sure you find a friend that knows your emergency plan as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is something we really push, especially in adolescents and college age students. You need to let people know. Because that is just people say having peer support and someone else watching out for you is just so critical, to avoiding allergic reactions and anaphylaxis.
Yes, exactly. Okay. So in in the statement you said a few seconds ago or minutes ago, you said 9 top food allergens.
Yes.
It just became 9 a week ago.
Yay. So exciting. Yes.
Yeah. So everybody, if you saw my post, it's about the FASTER Act, which was actually signed by President Biden on April 24th. And so a couple of things that are into that act is one, that it names sesame as one of the top food allergens in the US. But it also opens the door for a lot more research on food allergies. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, what's so great about it, like you said, sesame, and I'm so proud to be a part of that, because we did, once we knew we needed data on it, we did make sure that we published a whole paper just on sesame allergy. So they had all the data they need. And I just want to point out, sesame may be number 9, but even all over the world, and when we talk to our European colleagues, for sure, it is becoming more and more prevalent. And it's such a difficult allergy for people because and you can probably talk more about that, Tracy, how many hidden foods it's in. It's hard to identify.
Well, I should go get it. I did a video last week, just a thing. I put some sesame seeds on my finger and I'm like, this little tiny thing can kill somebody,
Oh no. Well,
yeah.
But like it's in sauces and different types of food. So having it clearly identified is it's so important. And I think this is just going to help so many. And so, yes, so that part I'm really excited about. I'm happy to talk more about sesame data later, but I do want to talk about the other FASTER pieces that are often overlooked because they're a little vague, but it basically, when you talk about research, it is handing over to the government to be able to report on food allergies more. And so one thing that's really important to me is, that public health data. And that's what we've been doing since I started my career in food allergy 16 years ago is really trying to pull together numbers, accurate numbers, So in 2011, we published our first paper with the 8% of kids having food allergy. And then in 2018, 2019, now we published kids and adults. But this is something that, moving forward, it shouldn't be done by, one lab. It should be something done, nationally, in a national government survey, which they do. They monitor so many health conditions. The problem with food allergy is it is a little bit complicated. Like I said, it's so confusing in it. There's so many other food conditions. So how do we support, them in being able to identify accurate food allergies? So we are working, our lab, CFAAR, is working with the NIH to try to develop accurate, short set of questions that can identify true food allergy to the best of our ability. Obviously, we're not going to be able to get all this data with, oral food challenges or testing. But what questions, are the most accurate that can relate to that best? So what's great is now, it is a prominent condition that there will be more research done and more support in making it more of a national issue with the other conditions.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that reminds me of the statistic that like every 3 minutes, somebody goes to the emergency room with the food allergic reaction, but sometimes it doesn't necessarily get recorded as a food allergic reaction.
That's right.
And that's probably part of the challenge in making this more prevalent of an issue within the government's eyes, right?
Yes. And you're exactly right, Tracy. What's so challenging again, and I'll tell you all my challenges I've faced in 16 years with this, but one of the big ones is we can say, okay, that's great. 8% of kids, 10% of adults have this, 32 million Americans. But what they want to know is, well, so what, right? Like not many people, like what's the morbidity? How many people are truly suffering? What is the kind of healthcare costs to this from the individual and from society? And so that's when we published our last paper that we're redoing on economic costs to show that it costs the US $24.8 billion a year. And
Wow.
It costs individuals, for every food allergic child, it's about a $4,000 a year cost for that child. And, those can be under or overestimated depending on where you live and your income bracket. But it's an expensive condition. And so showing that, and then your point about morbidity, meaning like hospitalizations or ED visits, we have done a couple things. In this last study, we looked at, for the children, how many times in the past year have you been to the emergency room for a food allergic reaction? And 20%, 1 in 5 said they had in the past year been to the emergency room. Then we did a national study with FAAR asking individuals from their registry, how many reactions have you had in the past year? And over 50% said at least one. And then another like 30% said more than 2. So it is important to collect this data to understand, what are families handling at home and treating, and then how many are actually going into the emergency room to get medical care, for it. And so it is a high number, which I think it also pushes the importance of collecting this data, and recording it, and pushes the need for better treatments and better policies, like you were talking about, like we're going to get to around labeling.
Yep. Well, and all of a sudden, all these television shows where I've seen people have allergic reactions, and I won't name the names of the channels or whatever because I don't want to blackball them. But I'm like, there was one that this person ate a piece of shrimp. He knew he was allergic to shrimp, and his bride was saying, "Don't eat it," but he was doing it to be with the crowd. And then he just goes home and lays down for 24 hours. I'm like, that is not how it happens.
No. And shrimp, I didn't talk about the top 9 in adults were the same, but shrimp is 2.9% prevalence. It's almost 3% prevalence in adults, followed by milk and peanut. But it is so much higher. And there's so many people with shrimp allergy. And, shrimp is one of also a lot of adults are developing it as adults. So 50% of adults said they developed a new allergy as an adult. And I will tell you, I've heard similar stories in real life where people have a shrimp allergy, but they love it so much. They're like, well, I will have one and I'll be ready with my meds. And so there's something about shrimp that seems very irresistible to many adults.
Well, yeah, I mean, I grew up in Maryland, and I would be like very remiss if I couldn't eat seafood anymore. But if it's going to kill me, I think I would give it up. You know, I mean,
great.
Hello. And, I was talking to somebody the other day, and like, she was saying, yeah, my tree nut allergy does send me to the emergency room, right? But my egg allergy doesn't. I'm like, but you never know when that egg allergy is going to send you to the emergency room, because it can waver, or not waver. It can just all of a sudden turn dramatic.
Well, and you're right. And this is an area that we really need to better understand in food allergy. We don't understand severity, right? But you're asked it all the time. For my daughter, I'm asked everywhere she goes, well, how severe is her food allergy? And I'm like, well, we don't have a scale. She's like, can she be around it? And I'm like, I'm the expert, and I'm getting asked these questions, and I don't know how to answer them. So like, who does? Who can answer that? But everybody wants to know, like, is this a kid that's going to have an anaphylactic reaction, or is this a kid that's going to have a couple of hives? And the problem is there's so many factors that go into that, like you said. So how much did you eat? What's the quantity that you ingested? What else is going on in your life? Do you have some kind of a viral or, infection that may decrease your immune system? Did you just exercise? hormonal changes. Like there's so many pieces that can influence it. And so that's why it's been so hard to create a very clean like severity scale and be able to tell people what they want to know. Like how severe can this be? Because we know, I know people who say, yeah, I only get a couple hives when I have an accidental ingestion, and it happens over and over and over again. And people who are like, no, I go into full-blown anaphylaxis. So yeah, it's difficult.
That is difficult. And they're not trying to be evasive when they're answering. I mean, because they don't know. And that's, again, the unfortunate part. So, all right. So let's jump to PAL, which is your new study called Precautionary Allergen Labeling, Preferences Among Food Allergy Stakeholders. And so this is new research that you're doing that is around the may contain statement or produced in a facility that may contain. So tell us about this study and what do we want to know?
Yeah, this is, I'm sure everyone with a food allergy, this makes everyone crazy. And it's made me crazy for years, with my own daughter. And so, it's an area that really requires some new policies and more work. And so this study was one where we wanted to better understand, we published a couple in the past, and then this one was, okay, tell us what you want. What do the people want? How do we make this policy? How do we, ground it in data? So a couple things I really want to highlight is one, people don't all, understand what these policies are, right? So precautionary allergen labeling, what does that mean? And so that basically is not regulated. And that is something industry puts on their food products, and they choose what label. So, may contains a common one, produced on equipment, shared equipment is another one, produced in a similar, or in a manufacturing, in the same manufacturing site. So, but there is like so many different ones. And then what it does is it makes the consumer have to decide, okay, does this sound safe? Or does that sound safe? Or should I try this or should I not? And it's just not fair because there's no regulation. It doesn't mean if it says may contain, it has a certain amount of the allergen that it could hit in it. And if it says manufactured in, it has less. But that's what we found people thought. So more people said they avoid may contain, but they will buy something that said manufactured in because they think it sounds safer.
Okay.
And so that's a big deal, right? Because there is no safer, but individuals are having to make up their own minds based on what they're reading. So that's where we really wanted to help, create one label. So there's no confusion that one is safer than the other. We did ask individuals like 4 questions about their knowledge around PAL, and only 1 in 4, only about 25% got them all right. And they were things like current US law requires that food labels identify the name of all major allergens, right? So this is the sesame thing. It was 8, now it's 9. And then precautionary allergen labeling that we talked about is mandated by law. So a lot of people think it is because it's on them.
Yeah. It's a CYA statement.
That's right. And the other one is precautionary allergen labeling is based on specific amounts of the allergen present in food. And a lot of people think that, right? Like you would think that you can add a label based on how much of the allergen may be in that food, but that's not true. And then the last question was that precautionary allergen labeling differs depending on the quantity of allergen present in the product. And again, as we discussed, I'm not going to hammer this in, but that is not true.
Yeah, the only way, like really on a label, is when you're looking at the ingredients list. And if you look at the very first ingredient, that's the thing that has the most, it's the 99, it's the higher percentage of it in the ingredient. And then when you get to the bottom, that's the least amount of ingredient. But when you're looking at spices or you're looking at may contain, you have no idea.
No, you have no idea. And so overall, 80% of individuals said they do not buy may contain. 20% said they did. But when you looked at manufactured in a facility that also processes the allergen, only 47% said they never buy it. So the majority will buy it. And so it's just that difference in language that is causing a difference in people's habits of shopping habits. So that was interesting. So then we asked them, well, what would you want to see? Like, what is your preference? And it was interesting because what consumers want, which I totally agree, is just say it's in there or it's not. Say, do not eat this food. But unfortunately, that's complicated because we can't. So their second one was probably the one, they probably picked it because they were most familiar with it. They wanted everything to then just have one label, and the label that they was the top choice was may contain. So as to not cause that confusion. So that's an area that, we're working, with the organizations, national organizations around, and FAAR around how do we push that out, and how do we get some kind of regulation around precautionary allergen labeling.
Okay, so I mean, I think it's so important because it is so unclear, and it would help us all because we don't understand it. But now makes me jump to events and food that's not prepackaged. And actually I was talking to somebody who works in I want to say fast casual restaurant.
Uh-huh.
And she herself has food allergies, but now she oversees, she's a VP of something or another. But they've actually are telling people, well, if you have an allergy, we just recommend you not eat here. And not because they can't they just don't want the risk because of the may contain or produce in a facility. And I'm like, then you're going to lose 32 million customers. I mean, really not that many in your area, but it's a potential opportunity for lost revenue. So this is an opportunity as well to do a lot of really clear training on producing it even in restaurants and catering and hotel facilities.
Yes. That's exactly right. And yay to events again, huh?
Yes, totally, yes.
How much have we been missing that? So exciting that there will be events happening again. And how do we now, as we initiate events again, keep them as safe as possible?
Right.
And that is definitely frustrating. I think we've all faced that. We've had really great experiences with, events and restaurants who take really good care of you. And then we've had some that say, I don't recommend you eat anything here,
right.
Because I can't guarantee anything. And that's really challenging. I mean, we just went out to dinner recently, and that happened to my daughter, where we went ahead and told them and then ordered. And then after we ordered, the chef came out and said, well, we don't know what's in all the spices. And I was like, well, but it's not in the food. Yeah, but we don't know. The spices may be mixed with something. And so it is really, really challenging. And then you don't know what to do. You're just sitting there, thinking, all right, the food's here. Does she just sit there and not eat? Or do we wipe out? Or, do we take a chance? Like, what do you do in those situations? And so you, as the expert, how do we make this change so that everyone can eat, and feel safe about it?
Yeah. I mean, and it's not like, the other part of the challenge is that we don't have an exorbitant amount of space, especially restaurants do, to make dedicated fryers or dedicated whatever, but teaching that safety precautions, how to do it right, or prepare it first. And now that food safety is really much more prevalent in the eyes of meeting planners and the catering industry, they were doing it beforehand, before COVID, but now it's really prevalent. And doing that, I think it's this really good opportunity to put those processes in place and communicate them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And like this in event planning, it's so critical. I mean, we know what the top 9 are. You know the ingredients. I understand that some things are challenging, and the industry taught me that. When I went to give a talk to them, and I actually published a paper with the industry partners at FARP to tell their side of the story. Why is it so hard for them, to truly label accurately? And it's true, certain ingredients that go into the final product come from all over the world. And how do you ensure, that someone wasn't using the same bag to collect cocoa as they were to collect peanuts, and there's some residual? But those are true true challenges. But as to the best of your ability to provide a safe option, which most people with a food condition can consume, is just so critical. And there are very safe options. And Tracy, you're the expert. You can probably rattle off a list, or help planners really figure that out. And so I hope they take this seriously, because if 1 in 5 adults are avoiding a food for some condition, that's a lot of people.
It is. And, and figuring out how to, in my course, Every Meal Matters, which I launched in January, that is figuring out where is food in your event, and then what are those standards that you want to set on how things are prepared and how things are served, and then what you're communicating out there. And that comes with that precautionary allergen labeling too. I mean, we as hosts of an event should put some sort of statement out going, we are producing this event in a non-certified allergen-free environment, right? And people with food allergies understand that, but they also want to know, how are you partnering with your catering partners to create a safe meal?
Yes, that's beautiful. Yeah. Because, I think at least most adults, you're around your allergens all the time. You're not going to avoid it. We try to keep our kids away. That's impossible. We know that you're going to be faced with someone next to you eating your allergen, and so it's really making sure you're not in an environment where there's nothing for you and you're just around everyone eating your allergen.
Exactly.
So it's definitely challenging, but having you, spearhead this movement to make sure all events really think about it, I think is just a beautiful thing. So appreciate everything you do.
Thank you. And I mean, and going back to the sesame allergy real quick, is that the U.S. is the 46th state to label sesame as a top allergen. So you said it earlier that other countries, the EU has it as a top allergen, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and actually the Middle Eastern countries already had it labeled as an allergen. So so thank you for your research on and pointing it out and sharing that it is a top allergen.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. And what we found in the US is it is a growing allergen. And also, it is a serious allergen. So although I said 1 in 5 kids go to the emergency room with any food allergy, when we looked specifically at sesame, it was 1 in 3.
Oh,
so
wow.
It is causing more ED visits. It, seems to be causing, more severe reactions, even though we already had that whole talk on severity, but that's the only way we can monitor it. So making sure it's actually listed. And I agree with you. I mean, that's the problem. And that's what our job is to produce the data or do the research to help us understand, and then I just got asked, what's the next big allergen? Right. So we'll go back to our data and better try to, figure out like what's next. But, talking about avoiding these allergens, one thing that's come up that I know, Tracy, me and you have talked about before is, we talk about events and we talk about, how individuals can do it most effectively. But one thing in this past year is, with COVID, there's been so much more food insecurity. So many people have been out of a job and so many people have been struggling, to make ends meet and to get food on the table. And we've seen the long lines, at food distribution centers. And I just want to, really express that this is an area too that needs a lot of work. We really need to make sure people with food insecurity can get safe foods, because currently it's just packaged and you just, they put in your car and move on. But how do we, as we open up, make sure that there are choices, at food banks? And Emily Brown, who we both know, who's working with the Food Equality Initiative, we partner with her to better understand, how we can help keep food insecure families getting safe foods who have food conditions. And like I said, there's so many food conditions in addition to food allergies. So just wanted to put a plug in.
No, I'm so glad you did, because it is another issue, but it actually really ties back to that labeling thing we were just talking about as well. And, meeting planners are really concerned about food waste or you should be.
Yeah.
And, you know, if we do have excess food at our events and we're choosing to donate that to a food bank or any other kind of community outreach, we need to make sure that what we're serving is labeled so that when it does go to those facilities, that somebody can safely choose that.
Yes.
And so it is so tied. Everything is tied back together. But it also reminds me of, you know, Colleen from Zigo Foods, you know, truth in manufacturing and being truthful on your labels, and the fact that spices don't have to be spelled out on labeling and things like that. That makes it, you know, some of that may contain statement as well.
Right. No, that makes sense. And, you know, how can we now, since we've been through COVID and we're so used to all this virtual stuff, right? Like how can we use that to our advantage? You know, so like one of the things she's doing is creating a marketplace, and can we make food as medicine in some way so that physicians can write prescriptions around it? Or, you know, what do we do to work with WIC and other, you know, governmental agencies, you know, Feeding America, to make sure we get some data and keep things safe, you know? And so, there's so much to be done.
Well, and her one statistic, and her one data point, I should say, is actually that, like on WIC, it says you can buy whole wheat bread, but as a person with food allergies to wheat or to gluten-free or celiac, you can't buy whole wheat bread. And then the WIC program doesn't allow you to buy the gluten-free bread. And so you're spending that money, and everybody, I'll give you the links to Emily's data on the cost of these food free from foods that actually put the burden in food insecurity. I wanted to bring up this statement here that my chef Francois Angenbach from South Africa put up here. Conscious and inclusive food and beverage offerings and operations could significantly reduce physical expenditure. This is a very underrated subject. And it's so true, because you could save money by thinking about how you're producing your food and beverage in your catering operations.
That is exactly right. And, you know, we are trying to work, and this may be something to partner on. You know, if there's any restaurants or, you know, event planners who want to talk about, you know, because you have to note anytime anyone has a reaction, right? So let's publish it, because if people see how many times it causes an issue, right? Then it makes more sense. So and that's when we published the economic paper. I mean, the expenses, the top out-of-pocket expense was for special foods. And that makes sense. I mean, we know that, right? But to actually publish it and say, this is how much more it's costing these families to get safe foods. Because, you know, the other thing we still don't have is, like, in a grocery store, you don't have a food allergy aisle where you can get free from stuff. You have a gluten aisle now, which is great, but not a food allergy aisle. So a lot of times, if you really want just free from and you want it simple, you have to go to specialty stores, you know, which not everyone can access. So that's more expensive. Or you buy ingredients and have to cook at home, but I don't know how many people have, you know, the ability or time to do that either. You know,
I was just thinking the same thing. I mean, and going online and Googling recipes for free from, because I mean, I'm not a recipe developer. I started doing recipes 10 years ago when I started this. And it's hard to figure out the right balance of that gluten-free flour or, you know, doing all these other things. But there's some really good experts out there to do it, but it's not taught in culinary school. So it's a big challenge in understanding how that does. And whoever figured out that aquafaba, the liquid from a chickpea can be a replacement for eggs, who knew? You know?
I so appreciate the amazing, you know, chefs or people who are publishing their recipes, who just find something and publish it for the world to know. It is so helpful. And with the world so connected, you know, there are so many great recipes, and all the wonderful food allergy community for putting out there what they have. But still, it is an extra step, and not everyone has the time or ability to do that. So again, just like what you said, you know, it can be a money saver if people take it into account, because what we found from industry is the number one cost to them were recalls, you know? So, and then when I've talked to even restaurant owners, what they've told me is, you know, we get a lot of food reactions. And so I'm like, that's great. It's not great, but it's great to know. Is there some way we can get some of that data and put it out there for publication? Right. So people see, the cost of having a food allergic reaction in a restaurant and having to deal with that for a restaurant versus, putting into place very, very strict rules, and I know a lot of other organizations are working with restaurants, but with event planning, I think you're pretty unique in that, Tracy.
Yeah. I'm trying. Lots to do, but I mean, it does remind me also, Shandy with Certistar, and her technology that allows you to upload your recipes, into their database, and it gives you and I the ability to go into a restaurant, and she codes it green. Yes, you can eat it. Yellow, it's like that may contain cautious thing, and then red, stay away, right? But it helps. One of her statistics, this was really interesting, or two statistics, is that it takes the allergy conversation is a 12 to 15 minute additional time for somebody to have when they're trying to figure out that menu. And so for a restaurant or a catering person, that's 15 minutes of lost time on another cover, right? But then also the fact that a food allergic person's bill is 37% less than a regular diner's bill because they're choosing safe food. They're choosing a baked potato or steamed broccoli because they're not ordering the filet mignon or whatever because they can't trust you. Right. So
too many things mixed in. Wow. I never thought about that. That's really interesting.
So, and with you and with me, I'm like, when we choose a restaurant and or a hotel or a catering company, we're going to choose the one that fits me versus fits the rest of the crowd. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. Oh, so much sense. And we rely on each other to tell us where are those safe places,
right?
Where can we go? And then we all go there. Right. and you have your favorite places who know you and know your, food allergic child or self. And you know it's safe. And that is really interesting. I had no idea about that, but
I need to hook you up with Shandy. Yeah. Okay, so we've been chatting for 37 minutes, and I know we could talk about constantly, but is there any other big nuggets that we need to know about food allergies in the research that's coming out? Your book that you mentioned, and I love the idea of food without fear and talking about just let's give a little snippet of that actually. Because there's diabetes, there's food allergies, there's celiac disease. What other conditions actually are related to food? Can you?
Yeah, I mean, there's intolerances, that so many people have, things like lactose intolerance, the two that get so confusing are milk and wheat, right? Gluten, right? Those are the two that are really difficult to decipher what's really going on, because you have layers. You could have a gluten intolerance, you could have a gluten celiac disease or a wheat allergy. So, and then similar with milk, but there's so many other things. Like even yesterday I saw a patient and they were worried about a food allergy because they ate avocados and they got itchiness in their mouth and tongue. And I think that's really something that so many people feel, and it's called oral allergy syndrome. And it is actually related to the pollen, your environmental allergy, incorporated into that food. And so usually it's just oral symptoms, and very rarely can it be anaphylactic. I personally don't know of any cases, but it's oral symptoms. But then those individuals end up avoiding that food completely, thinking they have a food allergy. So that's one that I see a lot. I see a lot in my clinic, and we diagnose a lot of people with. But there are other ones, and intolerances, as you know, is one of the biggest ones.
Right.
And people are diagnosing themselves a lot of times with over-the-counter kits and different methods, or just eating something and avoiding it. And so that's where it is really important. If you are having negative symptoms when you're eating a food, I can't stress it enough. See your physician, see an allergist, and get tested and do an oral food challenge. It's the gold standard test, right? You sit in a room under controlled conditions and you eat the food and you see if anything happens, and they've got the epinephrine ready and they're ready to go. So I definitely want anyone out there, and that's kind of why we wrote this book, is maybe you can figure out your symptoms and when it happens. And it also is like, does it happen in the first, right away, or does it happen the next day? Like all of these are signs to what could be going on in your body. So listen to your body, understand what's happening when you eat that food. Write down, in the book, we have a survey you take and you answer a bunch of questions to better understand it, and you take it to your doctor. And so it's much easier for them to like really decipher what you have. So yeah, there's so many food conditions out there. And I almost feel like it's growing. We're discovering more. Like we know so much more about eosinophilic esophagitis, which was often.
How did you just say that?
EOE. Is that it? But it's more common than we think. And a lot of times that goes unnoticed. It's usually when food gets stuck in your throat or you feel like you can't swallow it. And that's because you're having a reaction in your esophagus with this infiltration of eosinophils. So I know, am I getting too technical now? Should I stop?
No, but you just rattled that word off with such ease.
Yeah, that's the medical side of my life. Yeah.
Okay. So one that just popped into my mind is the Alphagal syndrome, which is growing worldwide.
It is.
And so everybody, if you're not familiar with that, that's actually an allergy to mammals, right? Based on a tick bite.
Yes.
And I do know a friend that it took him a couple of months to figure it out. And then all of a sudden, after like 2 or 3 years, it was over. Right. And so he had it and he outgrew it or whatever. But there's other people who it's very, very severe. And so they can't have anything from mammals. Is that right?
Yeah. No red meat or no. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. You are 100% right. And it is a tick bite. So we do see it in like the southwestern areas of the US more, but you can have it anywhere you live. You're just walking out, hiking, get a tick bite, and this specific tick that they've identified somehow can influence your immune system to have these severe, often very severe reactions to meat. And so that's another one to truly get to a doctor and diagnose. But like a lot of these, there's a couple researchers who are focusing all their efforts and careers on Alphagal specifically, which is amazing, and coming out with more and more data. We found a lot of it in the US. We actually have to publish that paper. We were working with some of the researchers who study Alphagal to give them our data for them to be able to like figure out, how much of it exists in the US. But that is another one that is very confusing to people because they could eat meat just fine. They love their steak. And then all of a sudden now they're having this potentially, almost very severe life-threatening reaction to eating it. So Alphagal, tick bite, like who knew? So yes,
exactly.
There's a lot out there. And that's why it's really important, again, to see an allergist and to really get it truly diagnosed. Because like you said, each of them have different treatments.
Right.
And so knowing what you have, knowing if it's treatable, or knowing how to manage it.
Right. And that's a management plan is really, really important.
Yes. And, one of my favorite quotes I always love is, from Maya Angelou, it's do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. And so I put that out as a challenge to myself all the time. Like as we get new research in, we need to act on it and make things better, right? And as individuals, figure out, okay, these are my symptoms and then do better, like get to your doctor, figure it out and enjoy. Food is so fun, like people should be able to enjoy it and not be fearful of it. And that's definitely a key message.
Okay, so I know I asked you last time, and it was a year ago, what your favorite food is, but so I'm going to change it up a little bit. But because of COVID and eating a lot more at home, do you have a new favorite food?
Oh my gosh!
Or you can tell me who you want to go eat dinner with. What famous person would you want to go eat dinner with?
Oh, so many people. If I really had to pick one, I'd probably say Oprah. I'd love to pick her brain. Yeah, that would be really fun. And favorite foods. I mean, we've gotten into so many new foods, which is really fun during COVID. And a lot more, obviously no one's eating out, so a lot more trying to eat healthy and eat at home. So yes, I don't have one favorite. I am a foodie. I enjoy food very much. Again, my daughter has food allergies, so we definitely only go to places or eat foods at home that she can also enjoy with us. But there's a lot you can do, and more and more coming out, even with food allergies. So yes, everyone should continue to enjoy what they can.
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time and everything that you're doing for our industry, for the industry, for food allergic families, and the overall community. It's really important. And I'm so glad that the FASTER Act and your research has actually helped with the FASTER Act to show the severity of the medical condition.
Yeah, well, I so appreciate you, Tracy, and everything you're doing. And we're all part of one big community, and everyone's, doing what they can to get us to the next level. And I'm hoping now with, new treatments, new policies, new prevention efforts, we'll start, being able to really tackle this, and maybe we'll see our prevalence numbers start to fall, which would be a dream come true.
That would be a dream come true. So, all right. Thank you, Ruchi. This is the Eating at a Meeting podcast, and we're celebrating Food Allergy Awareness Month and Celiac Disease Awareness Month. So be on the lookout for lots of good education across the board on food allergies. And until next week, stay safe and eat well. Thanks, Ruchi.
Of course, Tracy.